I see you.
Z. Clark received her Harvard MBA and spent over 2 decades leading teams at Fortune 500 companies and tech startups. But after instances of being racially profiled, experiencing microaggressions at work, even being harassed by police, she realized how breathing exercises were so critical to her mental health, not only to survive, but to also thrive.
Actually takes practical situations and challenges that we face. And I'm like, look, when the police harass you, breathe like this.
I'm Eddie Robinson. Stay tuned as we chat with author Z. Clark about her new book, Black People Breathe. She'll offer up tips on breathing and share some behavioral techniques and practices that can help provide clarity and understanding when faced with stressful situations. Oh yeah, I feel you. We hear you. I see you. You're listening to ICU. I'm your host, Eddie Robinson. Remember the infamous Will Smith slap when the actor walked on stage and hit comedian Chris Rock in the face during the Oscar ceremony in 2022?
Will Smith just smacked the out of me.
In an interview not too long after that incident, Smith said, quote, "A rage that had been bottled for a really long time came out that night." But what do you think would have happened if he'd just taken a few seconds to breathe deeply? I mean, could that incident have been avoided? What about the number of race-related challenges many of us have seen on the news, from racial profiling, police harassment, the microaggressions in the workplace? What do you think would have happened if notions of mindfulness and breathwork activities were options to really consider versus, say, hitting the gym or stopping by a yoga studio or paying a visit to a therapist? Twinkle in the eye, which activity do you think is the least expensive? Well, interestingly enough, a Harvard MBA graduate and author of the book Black People Breathe went from leading teams at Fortune 500 companies and startups in Silicon Valley to teaching concepts related to mindfulness, breath work, and racial healing for Black people. But does it really work? And if we're to consider these breathing techniques to ease stress, is it really solving the overall problem? I see you as we dive on in and chat with mindfulness author Z. Clark. She's here to tell us about her thoughtful and vividly illustrated guidebook to help Black people and all people of color heal from racial trauma by using tools and methodologies in mindfulness, meditation, breath work, and yoga. The book is simply called Black People Breathe. Z, thank you for breathing. Thank you for taking the time out of your schedule to be a part of ICU, and thank you for this book.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here with you.
And well, why put out a book like this? I mean, what led you to do such a thing and write a book that's called Black People Breathe?
Well, I was tired of hearing I can't breathe. I can't breathe was everywhere in the news. We would be watching video footage of one of our people not being able to breathe. And I was finding that I needed to breathe just to feel better throughout all of it. And now medical research is showing that the higher rates of high blood pressure and heart disease in African Americans is a direct result of discrimination, racism, microaggressions that we experience on a daily basis. And all of that leads to chronic stress. And when I was doing research on the symptoms of chronic stress, high blood pressure, who has higher rates of high blood pressure? Weakened immune system, what population was most affected by COVID? Anxiety and depression, there are a lot of Black women that go undiagnosed because our symptoms for depression are different than everybody else. Obesity, diabetes, we have higher rates of diabetes. Basically, we're not okay. We're not okay physically. We're not okay emotionally. And what happened to me was burnout. Basically, I experienced significant burnout from all of that stuff. And I found healing in breath work. I found healing in mindfulness. I took myself to India to learn all of this stuff, doing my own version, Black girl version of Eat, Pray, Love. So that's where this book came from. It was like, wow, these tools worked for me. I need to share this with our people and everybody.
And there's this word called mindfulness. I want you to kind of give us some insight on what that word means and why is it that Black people just don't associate themselves with this concept, or perhaps even yoga. I don't even want to admit it to you, Z, but I've never done yoga. Why do we not feel comfortable in those spaces?
We don't feel comfortable in those spaces because we're not in those spaces for the most part. And the media shows people that don't look like us. You know, when I think about yoga, immediately it comes to my mind is a white woman, maybe blonde, kind of perky and happy and maybe like namaste, namaste. And I'm like, that person doesn't understand me. That person can tell me to breathe, but doesn't understand what my daily struggles are like. So I just can't take them seriously because I'm like, you don't get me. So I feel like the media has portrayed yoga, meditation in the context of the white majority, when in fact, these practices were created by people of color. That's why I went to India to learn them. I wasn't trying to learn it here, though I've had some amazing teachers in the United States. So if you just say, you know, namaste, do a breathing technique, I'm like, why? Right? And so my book, Black People Breathe, actually takes practical situations and challenges that we face. And I'm like, look, when the police harass you, breathe like this. When your boss says something offensive at work and you don't want to get fired, but you really want to cuss them out, take a deep breath.
And that's powerful because seeing others who look like you allow me to want to participate more in it. I remember when a friend of mine, my best friend in New York, he took me to his church when I lived in New York. It was called Sacred Center. The church was founded September 9th, 2001. So that tells you about, you know, setting up consciousness, right? In the sense of what's going to happen within the next 2-3 days later. But it was a beautiful church, and it was founded on the principles of Ernest Holmes and spiritual mind treatment, New Thought. And it really sort of opened my mind up to breathing and, you know, reading the Tao Te Ching. And it was just a very powerful moment. But when I think it was like my first visit to this church, I'm sitting there in the seat, and I look to my right, and there's actress Vanessa Williams, you know, not Miss America, but actress Vanessa Williams, like the New Jack City actress Vanessa Williams, who's beautiful. She's fantastic. I love her. And I saw her and I was like, you're Vanessa Williams. And immediately that feeling of, well, if she's here and this massive, you know, Hollywood actress, then man, I'm probably at the right place. And it felt good to see Blackness and see people that looked like me wanting to be a part of this back at that time, you know, a very sort of interesting, almost not necessarily new concept, but it was very, very revolutionary and radical for me to think that breathing and spiritual mind treatment is something that really helps the soul.
Yes, yes. You know, a lot of what you said resonates. And in fact, for me, getting into meditation, at first I was like, Black people don't meditate, right? And then I went to the East Bay Meditation Center in Oakland, California, to their People of Color night. And I saw Black people meditating around. I was looking to my left, looking to my right, being like, okay, wait, I'm not alone here. And then I saw Alice Walker, and I was like, wait, the author of The Color Purple is also meditating. Okay, wait, maybe this is for me. Because before I was like, no, that's not for us. You know, I grew up in DC. There's a lot of Black people don't do that. I love the outdoors. I find so much healing in nature, but I didn't go on my first hike till I was 26 years old because I'm from DC. We don't hike. I was like, we don't hike. What you talking about? It's dangerous.
Right. Wow. You're listening to ICU. I'm Eddie Robinson, and we're speaking with mindfulness author Z. Clark. Her latest book, Black People Breathe, gets at helping us understand why breath work is so critical these days for communities of color to heal from the racial challenges, the stigma, the stereotypes, the stresses of what's happening in this country and beyond, not only for our mental and emotional health, but for our physical health as well. The artwork in Black People Breathe is really phenomenal, and it really helps shape the reading experience of this book. How did you and the illustrator come together to, you know, really collaborate on these visuals? You know, why did you feel that this was so important to capture and display for the readers in this book, for this book?
Yes. Well, the illustrator, Princella Serapena, she's Nigerian. She's amazing. She is amazing. But let me tell you the power of the illustrations. As somebody that studied yoga, right? I've studied meditation. And in most of the books, not all, there's a couple Black yoga teachers that have written books.
Okay.
But in most of the books, you see white faces doing these practices. When I first saw the first draft of the illustrations of Black people that look like us doing the breathing techniques that I learned in India, right? I see Black people, I cried. I to see something and see yourself, right? When I saw the illustrations in this book, Black person doing these very traditional techniques that can help us, so powerful for us to see us. I see you.
Coming up, we continue our chat with author Z. Clark. She tells us about an incident that she describes in her latest book, Black People Breathe, about how she was falsely accused of shoplifting and then confronted by police. We'll also get into the dynamics of Blacks being called out for speaking a certain way, for speaking intelligently. How does someone grapple with the constant stereotype of being thought of as less educated? I'm Eddie Robinson. A provocative second segment of ICU comes your way right after this. We'll be right back. If you're enjoying this program, please be sure to subscribe to our podcast, ICU with Eddie Robinson. You can hear all the past episodes and be notified when new episodes are released. Also, please take a minute to give us a review or comment. We love getting feedback from our listeners. You're listening to ICU. I'm Eddie Robinson. We're chatting with author Z. Clark. Her book entitled Black People Breathe is exactly what you think it's about. The book, published by Penguin Random House, highlights teachings that are focused on what people of color can do when faced with racist situations. Z actually trained in India and provides a how-to guide complete with illustrations on how to do several kinds of breath work and mindfulness treatments to ensure those communities of color have the tools that they need to thrive, despite the challenges and stresses that all come with discrimination, microaggressions, and drama at the workplace, or anything that makes a person feel uncomfortable when it comes to instances pertaining to race, gender, or sexuality. Z, thanks again for being with us to talk about Black People Breathe. You know, your book has some incredible moments of analysis. There seems to be this need in society for being a strong Black woman. But I'm sure one has to be careful that a person doesn't come off as being angry Black woman, right? I mean, and as a Black man in the workplace, I find that to be a fascinating dynamic as well, making sure that I'm careful not to come off as an angry Black man, but still maintain this sense of assertiveness, but with professionalism. But I digress. But this need for being a strong Black woman, is this one of the reasons why some women may not have the desire to seek out mindfulness concepts? I mean, how did this ideal of a strong Black woman play a role with your own struggles to initially start these mindfulness practices and to write the book?
Yeah. The term strong Black woman in my mind is a controversial one. It's controversial because we have been expected to be strong since the beginning of time. Let's talk about slavery. Let us talk about all of the work that Black women did, both, when we were enslaved people, and then what we had to do at home to take care of our own people, right? Let me tell you that strong Black woman in my mind means exhausted Black woman. And it was never a choice. It was never a choice. There is a new trend, soft life, soft girl, soft Black girl, right? This is the idea of self-care. This is the idea that we don't have to be strong, that it is okay to have feelings. It is okay to be sad. It is okay to be tired. It is okay. This was my biggest lesson from 2022. It is okay to ask for and receive help. Let me just repeat that because this one was big. It is okay to ask for and receive help. And this strong Black woman, yes, we are strong. Of course we are strong. But the point is that we don't have to be strong all the time. And then you couple that strong Black woman with angry Black woman, right? And when I connect this to my book, it is the stereotypes of angry Black women that I experienced both from white people that reported to me, okay, HR, my colleagues, right? And so I'm always scared that I was going to be portrayed as an angry Black woman. And you talked about also being a Black man in the workplace. I have a friend who is a Black man, and he is a heavyset 6'3" Black man. And he said just by his stature alone, he could say nothing, make zero facial expression, and yet people are scared of him. He will already be aggressive without speaking. And as a Black woman, and even my face, you know, there's a term, resting bitch face, right? Now, I grew up in DC, okay? You can't walk around the streets smiling like a happy-go-lucky. Now you're about to get jumped,
right?
Okay? Like, I mean, just
what's wrong with her?
DC was murder capital of America in the 80s, 90s. Like, that's my background.
Wow.
And so I'll just say that with a resting bitch face, then I automatically get called angry Black woman. Then I'm not a team player, and I haven't said or done anything. And so knowing that this might be how I am received without me doing or saying anything, I need to understand the dynamics and then be able to breathe, so that, because the other thing about my face is that I can't hide how I'm feeling. So somebody will say something and I will side eye, like I will, you know, I can't help it. And also, I will say, I went to Ghana for the first time last year.
Wow.
And I learned that there are these forms of communication that our ancestors did, that our cousins still do over there today, that I did not realize. I was like, oh wait, this is from my ancestors, like this. That sound. Okay, yeah. Wait, did you know that that's language? Did you know that that's communication? That people do that? And it's like, without even, you know, you say something, so I'm like, wait, okay. So all of this to say that it is so important to do some deep breathing in circumstances that are stressful, because if we're already assumed to be aggressive, angry, etc., then the deep breathing will help us to keep our calm, get our points across, whatever it is that we want to communicate or impact, and have it be received by the majority. Let's call them aspiring allies in a way that lands so that we get our point across, so that we get what needs to get done.
You know, our producer, Laura Walker, shared an experience with me about working for a high-end retailer in customer service. And she often worked with people over the phone, and on occasion they would come into the store to meet with her. And she shared that guests often looked shocked, to the point that, you know, you could instantly feel their reaction when they are saying, "Oh, you're Black," you know. I share this only, you know, with the only notion you mentioned in the book, you know, of the sense of me being here at Houston Public Media. I was the first and the only Black male on-air host. If I stand corrected, please, by all means do. But I remember being told when I got hired here that I was the first Black man to become an on-air host, a news host here at this station. And I definitely received the feedback and comments from listeners who were surprised to learn that I was indeed Black. You know, why is it that after statistics, especially as it relates to Black women, why is it that after statistics show that Black women are the most educated in groups of America, you know, the expectation is still there that Black women speak a specific way or are less educated?
I mean, I wish I could answer the why. I will tell. I don't know why. There's so many whys.
Why?
I will react and just share a couple things. One, I just want to share a quick story, because the thing is that I'm always like, it's so helpful for me to know that I'm not alone in these experiences. I do workshops. So I teach Black and brown employees at leading companies around the country. I teach their employee resource groups tools on how to deal with microaggressions in the workplace, tools on how to deal with imposter syndrome. And I do polls during those workshops.
Okay.
In one of the workshops, 100% of the Black people at this organization, this company whose tools all of you use, I'm sure, okay?
Wow.
100% of the employees, the Black employees, said they had experienced this.
Okay.
Ignoring my comment, and then they praise somebody else who says the exact same thing, okay? 100%. And it wasn't like 5 people on this workshop, right? So like imagine
I agree completely.
uh, so then back to like the story that you shared of your colleague. I remember back in the day before Zoom, there were conference calls. You know, you dial the number and then the dial the many, many numbers sort of thing. So for like a year, I was talking to this woman regularly on phone calls, meet her in person. And she goes, "Oh my God, hi, you're Z? Whoa, I didn't know that you were ...
Right.
Forward pause. I'm like, diverse? Let's talk about the definition of diversity, okay?
There you go.
But anyway, I hear you. And I will share in my book, I talk about a study that was done that was trying to understand who was recognized, whose faces were recognized, and also whose comments were remembered, right? And this study showed that Black women are on the bottom, okay, of this. So what does that mean? It means that when white people see our faces, they are least likely to remember our faces. I currently live in a small rural area, and multiple times people thought I was the other Black person, right? And then in the workplace, our comments, when we say something in a meeting, people will remember what was said, but they won't remember that we specifically said it.
That's
so
right.
If a white man says something in a meeting, what he said will be remembered. And yes, Tom said this. Black woman says something in a meeting and they remember the thing, but they don't remember that it was the Black woman that said it. Let's talk about being invisible, okay?
Yes.
Because, you know, the invisible man, I recently
Yes.
wrote an article about the invisible woman. The
Yes.
invisible woman. Who's the invisible woman? Black women. Because if we are not seen and we are not heard, how can we get promoted in the workplace, right? That glass ceiling is a concrete ceiling for us. And that's why we need to breathe so that we can shake it off, not let these folks impact our joy nor our trajectory. And that's what I'm about. You know, I have this traditional background, Harvard Business School, vice president of blah, blah, blah. Let me tell you how much I care about it right now. Because I did not feel seen. I did not feel heard. But it is important for us to be represented in senior leadership at companies so that we can help the rest of us.
Say it.
Yeah.
What do you say to those who say, you know what, the breathing works to ease my stress, but doesn't solve the overall problem?
Oh, I say no. Of course, it doesn't solve the overall problem. You tell me what does. Who can tell me one silver bullet that solves the overall problem? All I'm going to say is that we cannot wait for white folks to get woke. Because if we do, we will die in the process from heart attacks, high blood pressure, diabetes, cancer, and all these other things that we are currently experiencing as a direct result of this behavior.
Yeah.
So I'll say, no, it doesn't solve the problem. But for now, while the problem is slowly in process, hopefully, of being solved, I can feel better today. And that's what I'm about.
This is ICU. I'm Eddie Robinson, and we're here chatting with author Z. Clark, who's written a very interesting book called Black People Breathe. In your book, Z, you highlighted an incident that happened in 2018 where you and a friend were accused of stealing deli meat from a major chain grocery store, Rayleigh's Grocery Store in Sacramento, California.
I was definitely racially profiled. And there's no other reason. I paid for the item, so I couldn't imagine any possible reason why they would think that I stole.
Tonight, a major grocery chain promising to change.
The cashier who charged you for your groceries called the police on the both of you. Your car, which was parked for a camping trip, was completely searched. During this encounter, you engaged in what was called belly breathing.
Yes.
Tell us more about what happened in that experience and what that experience was like for you, for those who haven't read the book. And how did this belly breathing help you maintain your composure?
Yeah. So This was a very traumatizing experience for me. I was going on a camping road trip. I was also moving across country. I share this to say that my car was packed to the rim. And when you go camping and you're going to go in the middle of nowhere, you need supplies because there are no stores. So stopped at the grocery store in Sacramento, California, spent $220 on vegan groceries. And then somebody called the cops, an employee called the cops, said I stole deli meat. The cops came, the sirens, right, everything. And they were really mean. And they were like, did you purchase those groceries? Ma'am, did you purchase them? And I was like, here's the receipt. And then they proceeded to go through every item in the grocery bags and match it with the receipt, $220 worth of vegetables. So first of all, that took a long time. Then the second thing is that they didn't even understand what some stuff, what's this? I was like, that's a cucumber. That's English. What's this? Portobello mushroom?
Interesting.
Right? So I'm sitting there feeling attacked. And I really am like mad at these people because they don't believe me. And I have a receipt and they still don't believe me. They continue to search every crevice. Like imagine all of your stuff, your sleeping bags, your water bottles, like all, your clothing on the concrete parking lot at the grocery store for hours. I was scared. I was also scared that they were going to do something to me, right? And I really wanted to cuss them out. It is like, maybe it's just not growing up in DC. But I just wanted to cuss them out, but I knew what was possible. I knew the power that they had. And that is where the belly breaths came through. So a belly breath, just for everybody to understand, is when you inhale and you expand your belly as big as you can, like a balloon. You want to do it with me? Want to do anything? Okay. So take a deep breath in, inhale and expand your belly big. And then you exhale, let your belly come towards your spine. Inhale, belly expands real big, big. Exhale, belly comes towards your spine.
Yeah.
All right. This is counterintuitive because we are trained to suck it in and look skinny. This is society,
That's
right?
it.
But the thing is, the belly breath actually allows you to stimulate the parasympathetic nervous system. So let me just explain. The sympathetic nervous system, that is our fight, flight, or freeze nervous system and reaction. So it's like when we believe that we are under attack, like when these policemen with weapons are harassing me and searching everything in my car, I was under attack. And when you feel that, when your sympathetic nervous system kicks in, you're not thinking straight. You are not rational. And so when the police with their weapons were searching every crevice of my car, I felt like I was being attacked. And when our sympathetic nervous system kicks in, we're not thinking straight. We are very emotional. Have you ever get caught up in a rage or in sadness, and then you might say things or do things that you look back and you're like, ooh, that wasn't my best self. Well, in these circumstances, that's why people fight, flight, or freeze, right? Fight, you've seen people do that where they just get up in the cop's face, right? Flight, they run away. That doesn't lead to good things. Or they freeze, which also might not lead to good things, just depending. And so the belly breath, what it does is it helps stimulate the parasympathetic nervous system. That is the opposite. That is the rest and digest nervous system. That is our ability to feel calm. And so doing these deep belly breaths when you're under this intense pressure, you feel like you're being attacked, it allows you to be calm, to think straight, and be a little bit rational. And so I could calmly be like, well, sir, what exactly are you looking for? Oh, you're looking for deli meat? Well, I'm a vegan. I don't know what to tell you, officer, right? Versus, why are you doing it? You know what I mean? Like I just really...
And so, Z, going back to this Rayleigh's grocery store incident, that at the Rayleigh's corporate office, there were bets going on to see what you would ask for in terms of money in exchange for this experience. I mean, how did that make you feel?
Well, let me just share a little bit of the story for those that haven't read the book.
Yes,
is
please.
That I was pissed the next day. So I didn't get to where I was going because they took out all the daylight opportunities. I woke up at somewhere else at a different campsite without internet, but I had my laptop and I was pissed. So I did some breathing techniques to release the anger.
Okay.
And then I, with my rational mind, I wrote them a letter of real, dear Rayleigh's, you know what I mean?
Letter.
And I wrote a letter explaining what happened. And I asked them, what are their policies? What evidence do they need to call the police? And what sort of training do they have for their employees on treating people equally, right? And so in response to that letter, then the CEO or president or somebody was like, I'll issue a public apology. And so I'm in these negotiations. The ACLU assisted in some of these negotiations where I didn't want any money. I want them to treat everyone equally. I want people to be able to go to the grocery store and not get the cops called on them. That's what I really wanted. But what I found out, a very kind person who worked there, who was in the corporate office, wrote me a Facebook message and was like, look, we need to talk. I want you to know what's going on this side.
Wow.
And this person told me that it was a joke in the office. So I'm sitting here crying and upset, so upset that I'm treated this way in America. And then I found out that it was a joke, that it was just a joke. All these white people in the corporate office were laughing so hard that they had a bet going on what I was going to ask for. There was physically an envelope, with money in it and what people said I was going to ask for.
Yep.
And that, I just felt like I wasn't a human being worth anything. If I'm a person and yet I'm just a joke to these people. I was so upset. I can't even, yeah.
Coming up, more of our chat with author Z. Clark. We'll get into a conversation that deals with the behavior known as code switching. And then later, as the author describes the breathing tools needed for Black and brown individuals when faced with stressful situations, how would reading these experiences help white people become better at future interactions with people of color? What lessons can other ethnicities learn in the event that they're interested in picking up a book called Black People Breathe? I'm Eddie Robinson. Don't move. A captivating third and final segment of ICU comes your way next. We'll be right back. If you're enjoying this program, please be sure to subscribe to our podcast, ICU with Eddie Robinson. You can hear all the past episodes and be notified when new episodes are released. Also, please take a minute to give us a review or comment. We love getting feedback from our listeners. You're listening to ICU. I'm your host, Eddie Robinson, as we look to wrap up our conversation here with mindfulness author Z. Clark. Her latest book is entitled Black People Breathe from Penguin Random House. After experiencing a number of race-related challenges, from being racially profiled and being harassed by police to encountering microaggressions in the workplace, Z is looking to help people of color through realizing the power of mindfulness and breath work and how it really can benefit all of us in these turbulent times. Z, my favorite part of the book was the chapter relating to code switching. Now, for those who might not be familiar with what it means to code switch, well, here's a visual. Take, for instance, a 2014 Comedy Central skit featuring comedians Keegan-Michael Key and Jordan Peele, where in this sketch, President Obama, played by Jordan Peele, wraps up a meet-and-greet White House session with a group of onlookers. As Obama walks through the crowd of onlookers to shake hands, not everyone receives the same handshake treatment, if you know what I mean.
Nice to meet you, John.
Mr. Ian Roberts.
Nice to meet you.
Peter Tencio.
All right. Nice to meet you.
Jerome Smith.
Come on, brother. What's up, fam? You know this.
Keith Williamson.
Nice to meet you.
Mary
All right.
Woodbury.
Nice to meet you.
Jay Martell.
Nice to meet you, sir.
Tasha Robinson.
Come on, come on, come on. Feel that?
Emily George.
Feel that? All right. Yeah. Nice to meet you.
Daryl Stokes.
Come on. What's up, fam? How you doing? All right. Never forget about that, because that's all we got. Nice to meet you. Nice to meet you. All right. Oh, bring it in. Started from the bottom, now we're here. Yeah. Nice to meet you. All right. Nice to meet you. All right.
This is the closest example, in my opinion, from a visual standpoint of what code switching means. It's the notion of people of color having to adjust to what's being shared or communicated to someone when you're in these so-called white spaces. Yeah, it's a skill. It's a practice, if you will. I noticed an article with an interesting headline on it, which read, "Code switching is not trying to fit into white culture. It's trying to survive it." Language and culture author George B. Ray defines code switching and gets at why Black people code switch. He says it's a skill that holds benefits in relation to the way success is often measured in institutional and professional settings. So to code switch or not code switch, Z? That is the question.
Yeah, code switching is complicated. Before I answer your question, I just want to share a little bit about my background, which is, as I mentioned, I grew up in Washington, D.C. I grew up in a predominantly low-income Black neighborhood in D.C., and I went to a predominantly white private school in a wealthy suburb of D.C. at 8 years old. So, little Z, 8 years old, takes me an hour to get to this place filled with rich white people. And I was like, I don't belong here. That was the first time I experienced imposter syndrome, because I was like, first of all, I'm the only Black person. I'm definitely poor. I'm wow. And I spoke differently than everybody else. And I immediately was like, I don't belong. That's when I learned that code switching was important. That was my first. I was like, okay, guess I gotta switch it up to survive. And what ended up happening to me is going to predominantly white institutions. I went to Harvard for undergrad. I went to Harvard Business School, right? I was working in corporate America, and code switching became second nature. It's almost like, and then when you're constantly code switching, you're like, wait, who am I? Where's the real Z? And so in Black People Breathe, I invite folks to be intentional using mindfulness. Let me just define it. Mindfulness is paying attention in the present moment to what's happening right now inside of me and around me without judgment, not judging myself, right? And so in the context of code switching, it's like paying attention to, in this moment, do I have to code switch versus doing it like by default? And so I share a framework that's not mine, but there is a woman named Byron Katie who came up with something called the work, which is 4 questions of inquiry, right? The first question, well, it starts with an assumption, like what do you believe, right? And for me, in terms of code switching, it's like, well, why are you code switching? And for me, I was code switching because I felt like I wasn't going to succeed at work if I didn't code switch. I wasn't going to get good grades in school. I wasn't going to have any friends, right? Like all these things. And so the first question is it true, right? So is it true that I won't succeed in my career if I don't code switch, right? So my answer would be, yeah, of course it's true. That's why I believe it. 2, can you be 100% absolutely sure, like sure that that's true? And the answer is no. You can't be absolutely 100% sure that it's true. Okay. Question number 3. Who are you with that thought, right? Like, how do you act? What do how do you treat other people? And for me, with that thought, first of all, I'm not myself. I'm not comfortable, right? I'm super stressed out. I have low self-esteem. I don't love myself, and I'm not good at my job as a result, right? So the 4th question is, who would you be without that thought? Who would you be? I would be free. I'd be myself. I'd be able to share my opinions openly. I'd be able to bring my best self to work if I didn't believe that, right? And so here's the thing. I won't tell people blanket statement, don't code switch or do code switch, right? My strong belief is that you need to decide for you in that particular circumstance whether code switching is important or not necessary. Let me give you an example where it is necessary. At the doctor, okay? There is now a lot of research that shows that doctors do not believe in our pain, right? A study was done where you put a bunch of people with the same injury, broken leg or something like that, right? And then they don't get pain meds, right? Like the Black people don't get pain meds, the white people do. And it's like, oh, well, they're not actually feeling their pain. And even in a Pearson nursing textbook, right, it said that Black people exaggerate their pain. So all these nurses get trained in school to believe this. In these circumstances where it could be life or death, yeah, you got to code switch so you can get your treatment. You know what I mean?
It's ICU. I'm Eddie Robinson, here with Z Clark. She's talking about her latest book, Black People Breathe. Z, your teachings are often focused on what Black people can do when faced with racist situations. What would you say to someone who felt that these teachings lend itself to being like respectability politics, not self-care? What do you say to that?
I would say that we currently live in a society where our actions and our words do have an impact on whether we stay alive in the face of police. They do have an impact on whether we remain employed at our jobs, which then leads to whether we can pay rent and or feed our children. And so I would say that techniques that I share are about survival, and I share techniques about self-care afterwards. I'll share it for microaggressions, for example. What can you do in response to a microaggression in the moment? And what can you do at home when you are either angry or experience anxiety, etc.? So I would say it is both survival and self-care.
Jeez. In the beginning of Black People Breathe, you detail an incident, Z, that happened during a vigil in honor of Elijah McClain.
Yes.
An unarmed Black man who was killed by Aurora police officers in Colorado.
Yes.
The vigil, which featured violinists as a nod to McClain's love for playing the violin in animal shelters, quickly turns into a police protest filled with officers in riot gear. And you were there, right? Now, what was this experience like, playing such a beautiful instrument as the violin in honor of McClain's memory amid all this police protest and tear gas all over the place?
That experience was terrible. What was the experience like? It was awful and traumatizing. It was terrible.
Right now, 3 Colorado police officers and 2 paramedics are charged in the death of Elijah McClain 2 years after his death. McClain died in 2019 after officers put him in a chokehold and injected him with a powerful sedative. He was walking home when police stopped him while responding to a report of a suspicious person. Now, police say McClain refused to stop walking. They placed him in a carotid hold, which deprives a person's brain of oxygen. They also injected him with ketamine. Charges include manslaughter, second-degree assault, and criminally negligent homicide.
It was horrific. Elijah McClain was a 23-year-old Black man, a violinist, who was unarmed when he was walking home from the store. And he used to play violin for the kittens at an animal shelter. Okay, just the kindest, sweetest man, also a vegetarian. I bring that up to say that I too am a Black person, violinist, vegetarian. I'm even vegan, and there are very few of us out there in the world. So when I heard about what happened to him, I was sad, depressed, and I didn't go to any protests because I have already been tear gassed in my life. And I just really, I just could, for my own mental health, I did not want to get tear gassed again. But I went to a violin vigil. It was a bunch of violinists that went to a park in Colorado to honor the life of Elijah McClain. And as we are playing music, all these peaceful instruments, right? Beautiful music. And that's when the riot police came with the tear gas. And suddenly I am sprinting away from police holding my violin. It's like, wait a minute. How threatening are we with violins? Like, really? Really? And we found another place, hoping that they wouldn't come back and get us, right? We went a little bit away from the crowds, but I'll just say that the injustice was so in my face, in our faces. But I will also say, the community, the camaraderie, all of us there together, and knowing that I was not alone in believing in and fighting for, granted, fighting in with our music, right, are the voices of our violins fighting for justice. That was so powerful. It was almost like a religious and spiritual experience to be with a bunch of people that believed in the same thing. And that thing was peace and love and justice. This is why change needs to happen. And we all have different ways in which we can get there and try to do our part. But I will say that I'm always bringing things back to breathing. You got to stay calm in the face of the trauma, right? And maybe you can't in that moment, but like even afterwards, to take care of yourself, because the world is not changing fast enough.
You're listening to I See You. I'm Eddie Robinson with author Z. Clark. We're talking about her latest book, Black People Breathe. In this book, Z, you highlight several interactions with white people and how their interactions made you feel and even affected your body. How is it that people store their emotions within their bodies? And how can people apply breathing methods to those affected areas?
Yeah, in my book, Black People Breathe, I talk a lot about how experiences of racism actually get stored in the body. There is a phrase that I love to repeat, and it is this: the issues are in the tissues. What do I mean? I mean that when something happens, something bad happens, you might feel like you got punched in the gut, or you might feel that big lump in your throat, or maybe your shoulders tense up and they come up towards your ears, right? We all have different places in the body that we experience hard emotions because there is this connection between our mental and emotional health and our physical bodies. And so that's why it is so important when hard things happen to notice, this is mindfulness, paying attention, notice where am I experiencing this in the body, and then breathe in that place, because that simple act can help you feel better.
Z, how do you think reading your experiences in Black People Breathe can help white people with future interactions with people of color?
I hope that white people that read this book get a better understanding of the realities of Black people in this country. And I hope that the awareness around the impact of their words and their actions will help folks to perhaps be more mindful about interactions with Black people in the future. So just to be a little thoughtful, to pause and say to oneself, how will what I am about to say or do impact the person I'm interacting with? Just that pause, that mindful pause. I will give you an example. I had a boss once. I was new. I was a new employee. And in my first week of work, my boss said to me, "Hey, can I talk to you for a sec?" And I was like, "Sure." And then he closes the door behind him, private conversation. I'm thinking it's going to be like something. I was like, oh my gosh, something bad happened. What happened? And he said to me, "I just want you to know I didn't hire you because you're Black." Now, here's the thing. I never thought he hired me because I was Black. And my immediate reaction was like, not great inside, though I did my breathing techniques and he would never know. However, I know his intentions were good, right? But really pausing to think about what will the impact be, because I speak a lot in my book about the physical and emotional health impacts, consequences of racism, right? High blood pressure, diabetes, chronic stress, anxiety, and depression. For me, I had chronic insomnia. I just couldn't sleep. And so know that this is the impact. And while one small statement, you might say, oh, but it was just a small thing. But that small thing added up to another small thing, added up to another small thing for my entire life. Well, that's going to have an impact. And I also talk about epigenetics. What does that mean? That's about family inherited trauma, okay? That means that something that happened to my ancestors, that the trauma of that gets passed down to me, that gets passed down to, my offspring, etc., for generations. And so the impact, huge, because some small thing, I hate the word microaggression because it has micro in it. Microaggression can add up to a macro public health issue for the entire Black population. That is what I want white people to know. And while your intentions might not be bad, right? I have a lot of white friends too, right? But just knowing what the potential impact could be might encourage you to be more mindful about your interactions with people that look like me in the future.
Z, this is truly inspiring. Great material here. Thank you so much. Final question, something we always ask our guests at the end of our chat. Of all the accomplishments you've made, of all that you've had to endure as you've included in your book, what lessons have you learned about yourself thus far?
I learned that we cannot control the world outside of us. We cannot control what happens around us. We cannot control how other people treat us. But what we can control is what happens inside. What we can control is how we take care of ourselves. And so what I learned is that I have agency around how I feel. That just because someone says or does something that is hurtful, I have agency around what's happening inside of here. I can breathe to make myself feel better. I can have compassion for myself when I'm not feeling okay, but it's the agency piece that I realized that I had rather than relying on other people to make me feel good. I can make myself feel good.
Her name is Z Clark, author of the book, Black People Breathe. The book, published by Penguin Random House, highlights teachings that are focused on what people of color can do when faced with racist situations. Z, thank you so much for being a guest on ICU.
It's been such a pleasure to be here with you today, and I invite you to keep on breathing.
Our team includes technical director Todd Holzlander, producer Laura Walker, editors Mark DeClaudio and John Mitchell Good. ICU is a production of Houston Public Media. Follow us on Instagram and Twitter, and subscribe to our podcast wherever you listen and download your favorite shows. I'm your host and executive producer, Eddie Robinson. And I feel you. We hear you. I see you. Thanks so much for listening. Until next time.